It's a beautiful May day here in central Vermont, and we're going out to look for salamanders and frogs, and it's just a perfect time of year to be finding things in vernal pools. And it's one of our favorite things to do. So I'm here with Monica, who works with me as a Vermont Master Naturalist coordinator. And what else are you up to these days?
Yeah, so I coordinate the Master Naturalist program in the Middlebury area. I live in Middlebury. But I actually work with Cold Hollow to Canada. I'm the programs manager for Cold Hollow to Canada, which is up in northwestern Vermont.
Cool. And Sean, you also coordinate a program for Vermont Master Naturalist. And
Yep.
Both of them are fantastic, might I say.
Thank you.
But you have another hat you wear.
Sure, yeah. I'm literally wearing the hat for North Branch Nature Center, which is a nature center in Montpelier, Vermont. I'm the program director and community science and natural history coordinator there. And among the various things that we do at the nature center is a amphibian monitoring program.
Cool. And you brought a friend.
I brought a friend.
Hi, my name is Carrie, and I am serving at North Branch Nature Center with AmeriCorps as the Conservation Stewardship Technician, and I'm really excited to learn about vernal pools and amphibians today.
Good. Well, we couldn't have a better day for it. It's salamander weather, a little overcast. It's been wet the last few hours, so it's supposed to rain later. So I hope we'll find a lot of stuff.
I think we will.
Let's go look.
All right.
Yeah, all right. Look, there's some bloodroot.
Oh yeah, that is bloodroot. Wow, let's go take a look at that.
Okay. So it's really starting in February, around Groundhog Day, that a lot of animals that haven't been hibernating will start to be a little bit more active. A lot of things are mating or nesting. Their otters are already having their babies.
Wow.
Barred owls are nesting at that time of year. We're in Vermont, so sugar makers know that there are changes in trees that happen that time of year as well. And those triggers start to happen with all kinds of animals and plants.
Excellent.
And so that time period between February 2nd or so and May, early May, is the time when just change is happening at its greatest rate.
Wow.
And then we hit this time of year, and very soon the leaves will be bursting out.
Right.
And there's still a lot happening, but it's a little bit more stable for most species around here. This is the time of year when we really see lots of stuff happening. For these early spring wildflowers, this is the time when the leaves haven't come out yet. It's the time that they can see the sunlight.
Really soak up the sun.
Yeah.
And get going. And
Exactly.
They've stored energy underground, and they're ready to leap up out of the ground and get moving.
Exactly.
Because these flowers are already starting to go by.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the bloodroot is the flower itself is quite ephemeral. The leaf does hang on longer.
Exactly.
But, they're here and gone.
This is their time. This is
Yeah.
the time when they can see the sun
Yeah.
before those leaves are out.
And
This
it's
is their
also
time of change.
the time of amphibian migration.
And
So,
of course, this is also those late triggers
yeah.
are what really cause the amphibians to start moving this time of year.
Wow. Well, let's go look for them.
Yeah, let's go.
So we all drove here, carpooling, but we arrived at a friend of yours' house so that we could go look for these vernal pools. And right behind us, there's a road. Why do wood frogs cross the road?
Well, to get to the other side, of course.
Yes.
But just a couple of months ago, all the wood frogs, salamanders, they were either frozen like a popsicle under the leaf litter, or they were under the ground somewhere hibernating. And this is the time of year where they are coming across the road, moving across the forests, and in many cases that means moving across roadways, on their way to vernal pools where they're going to be breeding and laying eggs and all that.
Right, and it's a dangerous time for them, especially on rainy nights, a lot of mortality, and we'll go into that later.
Okay.
But let's go across this road, and I want to show you guys something.
All right.
So you've all seen a plant press.
Yeah, did you press some spring wildflowers?
Someone gave me a plant specimen that they prepared for an herbarium because I wanted to sort of let people know how these things are used, right?
Yeah.
But someone made this for me for April Fool's Day. So April 1st, I got this gift from a student. I got a gift from Dylan O'Leary made this for me. He's a field naturalist. And Jessica Griffin's the one who first gave me the idea. So I told him I've always wanted one of these. So it's a salamander press. Yes, and it has frogs too. Well, yes, but what I was thinking, because it's hard to teach about salamanders. You know, you see them most on dark, rainy nights in cold April, times, and May sometimes, and often run over in the road. Is where you also see them, which is sad. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to think about who we might see today at these vernal pools. And sort of
Hopefully they won't look quite like this.
Welcome to the vernal pool. This is one of my favorite places to come. Probably for all of you, like vernal pools are like one of the best places to visit in the spring.
This is a nice one though, can I just say that?
Yeah, what makes it particularly nice?
Well, it's a good size. I can tell even just looking at it right now, it's not about to dry up anytime soon, which will make it really good habitat for the amphibians that require them.
So what you just mentioned is key to what a vernal pool is, right? There's a lot of water right now. We're looking at an area like the size of a basketball field that's under a foot or two of water. This is a good sized vernal pool. What makes it a vernal pool is that this will all dry up by the end of June or July or so, and that's really critical to all the things that live in here, all the invertebrates, the amphibians, even the bird life that uses this. The fact that these pools dry up makes them vernal pools.
But they also, at the same time, have to keep that water long enough for the amphibians that lay eggs in them to not just lay their eggs in, but then those eggs need to develop into tadpoles or larval salamanders, and then they have to become adults. And so there's this critical balance between it needs to have water for long enough, but not too long, because then, of course, if they're pools that are there year-round, then you start to get fish and other predators that will eat some of the critters that depend on these.
Right, it's like a race for these the frogs and salamanders to get in here and do their business and complete an entire life cycle between the time that the ice just barely melts off of this and when they've totally dried out by July.
You know what's really cool about these though, and that life cycle is part of it. I love amphibians for many reasons, but one is I think this is just so cool that they develop depending on the temperature. And of course, if you have a body of water like this, and there's lots of water, then it holds that cold temperature for a long time. But as it starts to dry out, it gets warmer and warmer. And that makes the development of those eggs and larval salamanders or tadpoles go faster.
Wow.
And so they kind of work together where it can't be too small. You need enough time. But as the pool starts to dry out, the development happens at a faster and faster speed.
That's so cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the whole reason that it's important that the reason that all the critters in here like vernal pools, the reason that they need a space that eventually dries out is because fish are major predators of all sorts of invertebrates and amphibians, right? Fish are major predators. And fish can't live in places that don't have water all the time. And so the vernal pool is a fishless place, which makes it the ideal spot for what we're going to see.
Exactly.
So I know we're all super excited and focused on the frogs and the salamanders, but other things live in this pond, right, Sean? And there's a chance we might catch some of those.
Yeah, in
today?
fact, all my favorite things are the invertebrates that are in here because they're really cool and have weird stories
So invertebrates like insects, clams, shrimp, things that are not frogs and salamanders.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Although, can I add, as we're talking about these other things that depend on vernal pools, there's a lot of other animals too. We probably won't see them right now, but think of all of these eggs and frogs and salamanders. They're also all the predators that eat those. So birds and snakes and raccoons, and there's a whole host of other
I saw a
animals.
picture of a barred owl, a little video on YouTube of barred owls in a tree that was
exactly,
eating frogs, wood frogs.
Great blue herons
And
will
when
come by
we came
sometimes.
in here, we heard wood ducks lift off this pond. So yeah, they're habitat for more than what we were talking about in terms of the frogs and salamanders.
Should we explore?
Yes, let's explore. Now that we're at the vernal pool, Sean has placed a trap out there, and he's going to tell us how he has a license to do that. And we might catch something. We might catch frogs. We might catch salamanders. We just as likely, or more likely, might catch some invertebrates like insects that live in this pool. So these pools are habitat for lots of things besides frogs and salamanders, and we'll explore those while we're out here as well.
But yeah, if you kick up a lot of sediment and it settles down on top of egg masses and things like that, it can starve them of oxygen. So just try to move delicately. All right, so we're here at our minnow trap that we've set here in the vernal pool. Now, through North Branch Nature Center, we have special collection permits that allow us to do this and put traps in places like this for short periods of time for educational purposes. And so please don't go and throw minnow traps in your local vernal pool unless you have the appropriate licenses and permits and whatnot for that. But what we've done is we put this minnow trap in here for a few hours overnight. We put in glow sticks as well, which kind of attract things into it. And so we might find frogs and salamanders, we might find invertebrates, we never quite know. So we'll lift it up and see what we get. All right, well, right away we have one of my favorite things in the whole vernal pool, which is this little critter called a predaceous diving beetle. So what we'll do is we're going to take this trap back to shore, and we'll put him in a little tray for us to look at so that he or she can be more comfortable while we're checking it out. All right, let's put our diving beetle into the tray.
You said they bite.
They do bite, so
so
we're
you
going to
just
do this a little delicately.
Reach in there and grab it, huh?
No, and they're really slippery. They have really rounded shells, so they're really hard to pick up even if you wanted to.
Here we go. Go, little guy.
There you go.
Woo. Oh, you're brave.
I know. We'll let him calm down for a second, and then we can put him in a little dish to look at him without all the mud and the dirt. And
What are they eating?
They're eating everything in these pools. That you eat anything that you can fit in your mouth, pretty much, right? So like most of their prey are going to be little invertebrates, but they'll take minnows in places where there are minnows that they cross paths with. They'll go after tadpoles of frogs. They'll even eat newts. These are totally like the lions of the vernal pool. These are the top of the food chain, exactly.
Give them all our respect.
The thing about these diving beetles is that they have scuba tanks. So if you look at the back end of its shell, you can see a little air bubble trapped right along that's. It's like if you've ever seen like a ladybug, right? Like fly, a ladybug's a kind of beetle too, right? Yeah. So they open up their shell and their wings come out from under that, right? So this diving beetle has those same shells on each side called elytra, and what it does is it goes up to the surface and it lifts those elytra up. And it collects a bunch of air. Yeah, there's doing it right now.
Yeah.
So right now it's collecting air underneath its shell.
Because over time, does the air escape? Is that why it has to redo it, or does it breathe it in?
So it's like that air serves as like the scuba tank, the oxygen tank. So it's taking in. So it collects air under the shell, and then it uses that air to breathe. And then once the air is no longer oxygenated, or when enough of it has escaped, it repeats.
Oh, because I thought it was doing that for buoyancy, like to regulate how hard it was to go up and down, but it's actually breathing.
It's actually breathing, right? Wow. Yeah. So these are insects. So these don't have gills, and so this gets around by underwater by carrying its air with it.
It's air with it. Yeah. So we're just looking at this predaceous diving beetle and how it breathes underwater with its own little air bubble. But you were telling me, Monica, about frogs and gas exchange, or maybe all amphibians. Tell me that story again.
So I love this lead-in to a really cool trait about amphibians. So amphibians, if you see amphibians, they have that kind of moist skin. And most amphibians really need to keep their skin wet at all times. Frogs, salamanders, that's why they live in and near the water. But one of the reasons is that their skin has to remain wet is because that's how gases get into the body and out of the body. In fact, some of our salamanders, the little redback salamanders that we might be able to find later, and some of the other ones are part of a family called the lungless salamanders. They don't actually have lungs. They don't breathe in through lungs the way we do. All of their gas exchange actually comes through their skin. And so it really does have to remain wet at all times in order to allow the oxygen to get into their bodies.
Basically breathe.
Yeah, exactly. They
lungs.
breathe through their skin. And really most amphibians, even the ones with lungs, get at least some of their oxygen through their skin as well.
If you're going to pick up a red eft or some other kind of salamander, that you don't want to have bug repellent or even perfume or strong soap on your hands.
And so if you have bug repellent and you reach in and pick up, it's kind of like breathing in bug repellent. It's really bad for them. So yeah, so lotion, sunscreen, bug repellent, really if you have anything on your hands. And even our skin oils could have some at least minor impact. So it's great. It's great to interact with these critters, but we do want to be really gentle and not pick them up more than we need to.
Thank you.
The best ways to look for salamanders around a vernal pool is to actually look at under the logs and the debris and any objects that we find to turn over. For a few reasons. One is that we might find some of the creatures that don't actually go into the vernal pool, like spring peepers or redback salamanders. But this time of year, we may actually find something like the spotted salamanders if they could still be returning from breeding. It's a little bit late in the season, so I don't know what we'll find, but should we go take a look?
Yeah. And what's the best way to flip over logs? Is there like a log flipping etiquette?
Yeah. So we're surrounded by a lot of logs, right? Probably the most important thing is you're always going to want to return the log to the same state, because if it is habitat, you don't want to end up wrecking the habitat. So you want to be able to roll it back and then roll it right back into the same hole where it was from. This one might be a little big. Let's see. Oh, there we go. So I'm rolling it back, and then I don't see anything down here. I saw an earthworm, which is kind of cool too. You can see all kinds of other things. There's another, maybe a little mammal hole down there. But then I'm going to roll it right back, and maybe kind of just make sure there's still sort of a seal so that it holds the moisture in. Even if we don't find something right now, it's still habitat. And another day, there might be something under it.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a redback.
Oh, I see
And another one. 2 under 1 log. Oh, and 3. There's another one right there.
There's a 4th.
Look, just under 1 log, we found 4 of them.
Wow.
You can see how common these ones are.
Guess what I found?
Ooh.
Oh, do you have another one?
Ooh.
You have another 3 of them.
All different sizes. I heard they're one of the most common vertebrates in the forest. Look at them.
Yeah, in fact, you say that, and so what I've learned is that if you take the biomass of redback salamanders in the northern forest and you compare it to the biomass of any other vertebrate species, there's actually a higher biomass of redback salamander than anything else. So,
well, that's certainly been true today.
yeah, yeah.
We're finding
I think they say there are about three
and
in every square meter of forest up where we live.
Well, we maybe spent all of 5 minutes looking
Right.
around and found 3 right here.
These are redback salamanders, of course, and we mentioned earlier that these are lungless, so these are among the salamanders that breathe through their skin. You can also see, you can see how tiny that one is. And I've always found it amazing. These guys can live an amazingly long time. You think of something so small and you usually think of them as being kind of ephemeral, like a lot of our other small critters. But these bigger ones might be maybe in their teens. In captivity, salamanders like this can live into their 20s.
I'll grab mine
amazingly
back.
old.
Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to keep track of all of them together.
To babysit all the.
Do you want a nice wet leaf to keep
I
it
would
on?
love a wet leaf to keep it on, and
Yeah.
I will go put it where I found it when we're done.
Yeah. One of the things, the stories I love about these guys, they will actually guard their eggs. And so a female will lay eggs under a stump or log. These are not the ones that are breeding in the vernal pool. They breed in a nice moist place under a log or under a rock or in the leaf litter. And if you see a female with her eggs, then they do guard them against other salamanders and against insects that might come and eat them.
Is it just me, or are they super cute?
They are super cute.
I think so.
I feel like salamanders
Look
are
right
like,
at them, and they're like
yeah,
little ETs or something.
exactly.
You know? Yeah, they're adorable.
But
And it's fun to see a little bit of difference in the color. Just a little bit. That one looks a little rustier to me.
Right, and they're called
Yeah.
redback salamanders, but sometimes that stripe looks more yellow, and sometimes you really can't see a stripe there at all. You
Yeah.
just mostly see the gray.
In some places they're almost black. Yeah.
I mean, as you can see by searching
Nobody-
for 5 minutes. and then
Nobody
finding
move your
one.
feet.
Okay,
The little one has just taken a jump.
okay. Salamander down. No, there he is. Wow, good eye, Sean.
I'm
Well, you
gonna
know what that
excuse
reminds me
myself
of?
and put it back
I'm
in
gonna
the
put
woods.
mine back too.
We should
All right,
probably put them all back.
We'll go put them back.
Okay.
All right.
And there's a spring peeper. So we did find a frog today. It's not the one that I was actually most expecting to find here at the vernal pool. They do use the vernal pools, but they don't need the vernal pools. They'll breed in other bodies of water as well. It's our smallest frog, but one that makes a very loud noise.
The
Do you know what
spring,
it is?
Yeah, the spring peeper.
It's a
the one-
spring peeper.
That's the one Carrie picked.
Yeah.
There's your frog.
This is probably the one that folks are maybe most familiar with, even if they don't know it. These frogs are incredibly loud. They're the size of what, a quarter, the size of a thumbnail, right? But they're one of the most deafening animals in the forest, and you know they'll use any retention pond behind a neighborhood or beaver pond or something like that, and when they get going by the hundreds or thousands, there's like you can't hear yourself think next to these.
Right.
And yet they're you can go out and look at one of these ponds and know that there's hundreds or thousands of them in there, and you can't find a single one.
Right. No, all you can
Right.
hope to see is the throat pouch,
Right.
opening to give you a little clue that they're there when they're singing. And that gets
Exactly.
huge, right? And I've sat near a pond full of them, and if you lie back, it's like the sound will go over you, and then as you sit up, it hits you again. It's just like this wave of sound.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So they have these little padded toes. What's that about, Monica?
Yeah, well, so a couple of our frog species, including the peepers, have these pads on their toes. The other one is the tree frog. And they're actually like little suction cups, and it helps them to climb up.
Because they live part of the time up at the top of things. And,
Yeah, exactly. Or even when they're calling, they'll often kind of go up a stem of something and call from near the water, but right up above it. One of the characteristics about these, though, is that if you look carefully, you can almost see an X on the back. It's not as pronounced in this one as it is in some others, but there's kind of a V behind its eyes and then the matching V that turns it into an X lower on its back.
I think what gives it away for me, though, is just how delicate it is. It just has
Yeah.
that sharp little nose
Yep.
and those fine little fingers, and it's tiny. I
And
mean, I guess
speaking of-
sometimes young wood frogs are small.
Yeah, and speaking of how delicate it is, I really probably should
Should
put it back very
yeah.
quickly. My hand is wet, but it's not. It's losing some of its moisture, and just so we don't stress it
Let's
out
do
too
it.
much.
All right, so we just found maybe our first evidence of salamanders in this pool. We didn't find the salamanders, but we found what are called their spermatophores. So I'll try to take one out of the water gently here. So this here the super cool feature. So these are called spermatophores, and what's going on with this is in the spring, once the snow melts away and the salamanders, spotted salamanders and Jefferson salamanders, once they come into the vernal pools, all the males, they lay these little white pedestals. And on top of these pedestals, they put a little packet of sperm. Then the female salamanders, they come into the vernal pool, and male salamanders will come and escort the females around and try to show off their favorite spermatophores in here. And if the female so chooses, she'll kind of go over the top of the spermatophore, and she'll use her cloaca to pull up the sperm packet on top of the spermatophore. And so what we're seeing here is basically evidence of salamander mating. So even if we didn't find any salamanders, we know just from this little white kind of jelly pedestal that there is a healthy population of salamanders using this vernal pool.
You're right near something else I'm noticing, Sean, while you're down there.
Yep.
Is what's that moving, it looks like an insect house to your, do you see what I'm looking at?
Right here?
Yes.
Yeah. These are caddisfly larvae. So they're almost like the decorator crab of the vernal pool. So they're insects, and they're this little, like almost like little caterpillar, like grub-looking larva.
Oh my goodness. Look at that. So there's something in that.
Yeah, I'm actually going to face that towards the
Oh,
camera
yeah,
here. You can actually see like the hole here, which is
Yeah.
really cool. So if we watch that long enough, its head might actually come out. So inside this, there's actually a like a larval-looking thing. And it goes across the floor of the vernal pool, clipping hemlock needles and bits of leaves and bark, and it attaches it to itself in this home. You know, there's many different types of these caddisfly larvae in the pool, and there's thousands of caddisfly species I think just in Vermont, certainly in the Northeast. And in many cases, you can actually tell them apart based on what they use to build their homes. I love that they kind of tell a story, like pages of a book of where they've been, right?
Right.
One could actually go and look at all the different species of leaves that it's made a home out of, and you could get a whole census of the forest canopy structure
from the
house of a caddisfly.
So cool.
Nice. So we know that there's spermatophores here, right? So
Yeah.
that's sign of salamanders. Hopefully we can now go find some eggs.
I think I see some, in fact.
Great, good. So we have donned our hip waders, and we've put on our polarized sunglasses so we can see clearly under the water without getting all the glare. Wanted to talk a little bit about how we're doing this safely. So we're moving really slowly as we move through the vernal pool. We're making sure that wherever we step does not have any egg masses or any critters that we can see. And it's really important too that as we move around, we're not kicking up a whole bunch of sediment, because as that sediment settles out over top of an area, it can settle on top of salamander eggs or frog eggs and kind of starve them of oxygen. So we move slowly, deliberately, methodically, and if we have sunglasses, also are helpful. Hip waders are definitely important, because what looks like it might be 6 inches deep could suddenly go up to your thigh. Yeah. And we're also entering this pool in a place where there's not really anything happening right along the edge here. It's a pretty, there's not a lot of vegetation and eggs or anything like that. So we've kind of found a good home base that we can come in and out from. So, Monica, you've found something.
I found something out there. So the first thing I found was an egg mass that we might be able to show you a little bit better in a minute. But the egg mass itself was starting to hatch. That has little tiny tadpoles hatching out. So I was able to capture just a couple of those tadpoles in this bin, so we can look at them a little bit more carefully. These ones probably just came out of their eggs just this morning, this afternoon. They're very young.
Newborn wood frogs.
Exactly,
Yeah.
newborn wood frogs.
All right.
So this is where those little tadpoles came from a minute ago. What we're looking at is a group of wood frog eggs that's actively hatching. So these larvae have have already developed as much as they're going to within the egg, and they're starting to come out and swim around.
How does that feel? Is it all slimy and gross?
Kind of feels like cold, loose jelly. Yeah, this is more like tapioca or like not non-Greek yogurt. Cottage cheese, not quite cottage cheese though.
So the salamanders are kind of packed all together in this jelly material. Whereas the frogs, and so the case itself is kind of all in one mass, whereas the frogs are a little bit more, you see the individual eggs a bit more.
Were you pointing out the egg mass over here that's actually coming out of the water?
Yeah,
I just noticed that one.
Yeah.
There's like a extra like membrane outside of the
Right.
whole egg mass holding it all together. So this one here that's hanging onto the branch is a good example of a spotted salamander egg mass, I think, because it is just holding so well. Wood frogs are like the size of a $50. Spotted salamanders are big, but like it would be impressive to lay a softball size massive eggs, right? So it's almost like astronaut food or whatever, like where it's like just add water. When they actually lay their eggs, they're like desiccated, and they lay a little egg mass that might just be the size of a raisin or something like that, and then really quickly the water absorbs and they expand to that big softball size. One of my favorite stories that I've heard is folks seeing wood frog egg masses in trees.
Oh.
Have you heard this before? So barred owls are major predators of frogs and salamanders in these vernal pools. So barred owl comes and he grabs a wood frog and flies up to a tree branch to eat the frog. The frog, in its last moments of life, lays a bunch of eggs on the tree branch, and then it rains and it all swells up with water, and so you have a full-size wood frog egg mass up in the tree branch from that.
Over here, I'm actually standing next to this clump that was laid underwater, presumably, when the spotted salamander was here in the pool. But now that some evaporation has happened, these ones are in kind of a troubled space right there.
And are you thinking of trying to bend that down? So
I'm wondering about how to best do that.
Intervention.
I know, there's always this question, right, of whether to intervene or whether to let nature take its course. And there's never a good answer. What would you do, Sean?
Let's intervene. I think we should fill the bucket, break the branch, and so that way we can enjoy these eggs, and then we can settle it down carefully into a nice new spot once we're done.
That sounds good.
And maybe brace it where it's hanging above the bottom.
It'll give us a good chance to see it better later on.
Oh wow, I see what you're saying about it being all one.
Yeah. Put it back in a similar place, but in the water later. How about that?
Weird.
And are those hatching, Sean? Do you see shape to those?
They're not yet. No, these are pretty young.
And we're calling this spotted. Are we?
These are spotted salamanders. Jefferson salamanders tend to lay a lot fewer eggs, somewhere between like 5 and 30, whereas spotteds lay between like 30 and 200.
So holding these spotted salamander eggs it really feels miraculous. I mean, it's such a unique piece of spring and special to Vermont and other places, but I really associate it with my time here, and this is the kind of thing when we go out with Vermont Master Naturalists that just blows people's minds, like they've lived in Vermont, many people, for a long time, and yet they haven't had a chance to see this kind of thing. So it's just great to be out here with all of you and have fun finding signs of spring that are really exceptional. I mean, that the salamander climbed out, sort of was frozen all winter, climbed out into the pond, laid her eggs, picked up the sperm packet from the male and then laid her eggs, and here they've, grown to this size by being immersed in water, and it's just, it's really something.
So we just walked a few minutes through the woods to get to another vernal pool. Now we found a lot at the last spot, a lot of wonderful things. But there's one species in particular that we're on the hunt for, and it's fairy shrimp. And so we've just gone a little bit farther down drainage, and now we're at another beautiful vernal pool in the woods. And we're gonna just look around the margins of this and see if we can find just a couple more things that we weren't able to find at the last spot. Yeah, so so we just got a couple. Many of the species that we've seen today, like the peeper and the newt and salamanders, they like vernal pools, but they can get by in other types of places sometimes too. But not the fairy shrimp. The fairy shrimp are a vernal pool obligate. They must have vernal pools to survive and live out their life cycle. And they are not in most vernal pools. So that's why we just walked through the woods, hitting a bunch of different pools on the way to this one to try to find a little pocket where we could see some fairy shrimp. So this is my favorite species, one of my favorite species on like the planet here, because of their, I mean, they're basically like sea monkeys, right? They kind of look just like that. Fairy shrimp spend their entire life in vernal pools. So they lay their eggs in the water, and the pool can dry out. And it can stay dry for decades. And the eggs of the fairy shrimp will just remain there, viable, intact, almost like a seed that's waiting to be planted. And you know, a decade later, you know, the pool could be refilled with water, and the eggs will hatch, and out come more fairy shrimp. Which is exactly why sea monkeys work that way, right? You get them in a packet, and they're nice and dry. All you have to do is add water, and then sea monkeys appear, right? So then the next question is, how on earth does a fairy shrimp actually get here in the first place? Because obviously they can't really disperse themselves through the forest floor like a salamander. Right? And so what happens here is that when the pools are kind of drying out, and there's herons and ducks and even foxes and raccoons and stuff moving through here, they pick up the eggs on their feet. And then they walk through the woods, and they go from pool to pool, and they actually deposit the fairy shrimp eggs in new pools. So it's almost like their eggs are like seeds, like they're being like planted around the forest in different pools. So these shrimp might be here, you know, 1 year, but not the next. It could be several years, and so it was really lucky that we actually got to see a couple moving around here in this pool today. It can be tough to tell if the pool you're at actually is a year-round pond, or if it actually dries out if you're only here once. So if you're out doing like an ecological assessment and you're trying to figure out what's the story of this pool, like we might look out at this. This is a large pool here. It's like a football field across, right? And it's a couple feet deep. But the fact that there's fairy shrimp here telling me that this pool dries out completely by the end of July, which is really surprising, but this is evidence of that. And so as we're trying to give landowners recommendations of how to manage the ponds and wetlands on their property, the fact that there's fairy shrimp in here tells us this is definitely a vernal pool and should be treated as such.
So I'll say, Kerry, you had a great idea. You go,
Ooh, look.
Oh, it's perfect.
Wait, turn this.
I did see it. Woo! Good done.
Did you get it?
Yeah.
Good find.
Wow,
right.
His tail's starting to flatten out already. This
little
is like
bit.
a little bit of a
Yeah,
later
yeah.
stage.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
It
See,
is.
they get a little greener, right? And
Yep.
as they get older, and they start to, that tail starts to flatten out. So I don't know, how old could this thing be?
This could, amazingly enough, this thing could be 5 or 6 or 7 years old. Or maybe more like 3 or 4, something like that. So this is one of the ones that I picked this morning.
Yes, you
Oh,
did.
that's right. That was yours.
Way to go. All right,
And the one that was in the one that was squished is a little more orange than this one, right?
younger.
Which was So
Yes.
so what happens is you know, these spend several years as that bright orange red F that many of us find walking around the woods, and they spend several years as a terrestrial salamander, and then they come back to the vernal pools or wherever else they're breeding, and they spend the rest of their life, which could be many more years than that,
in this kind of eastern newt stage, and this is kind of in this transition between the two. So when they kind of become the eastern newt phase, they go from that bright orange down to this like gray green. You can still see the bright red spots. Then also their tail flattens out. So since they're going to be aquatic for the rest of their life, their tail flattens out to be used like a big rudder like
Isn't
that.
that crazy?
Yeah.
They're able to do that.
Yeah.
The understanding is that they need to walk about for a while because they do live in beaver ponds a lot, and beaver ponds only tend to last for 15 or 20 years before the beavers have to move on to find better food. So they can't just stay in the pond, you know, indefinitely. They have to be able to move, or their progeny have to be able to move, you know, somewhere else. So
Right.
It's amazing to imagine one of these little fellas walking for miles
I know.
through the woodland.
Although
I know.
he was making tracks when you saw him.
Yeah.
Between the time you saw him and the time you grabbed him, he moved several inches. You know, so
Yeah.
I mean they're focused in their walking when they're going somewhere.
I think it's worth noting too that there's a reason that it's such a bright color. Especially
yeah,
this one
yeah.
is not as bright as those red Fs that you sometimes find that are really bright orange. But they're announcing to predators that they are toxic, and they do. Actually, many amphibians have some level of toxin, but the newts in our areas are the most toxic.
And especially in the eft phase.
I believe, especially in the eft phase.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah. Well, they have to have some protection because they're so visible out walking. I mean, they sort of trade off. They become visible, you know, instead of
Right.
trying to hide.
Right,
You know, it's like stay away
exactly.
from me. It's so cool. So we were talking, Sean, about the vernal pool, but we're in a broader forest, and this fellow is a good example of someone who spends time in the pool, but also in the forest. How important are the forests?
Sure, yeah. You know, even though we came to a vernal pool to find all these amphibians, frogs, salamanders, they spend most of their life out around here, within the several hundred yards around the pool. You know, the peeper was another great example of something that we found not in the water, but actually under a log near the water. So you know, these vernal pools are used for just a few weeks of the year, and for the whole rest of the year, these animals, the spotted salamanders, the Jefferson salamanders, this newt here that's walking away, the peepers, you know, they'll be out and about. And so when it comes to understanding the connection between pools like this and the forest, you know, it's all connected, right? There's it's, you know, when people are trying to decide how to conserve a vernal pool or how to protect the pool, it's more than just protecting, you know, the square footage that's the water. It's the several hundred yards around it, or even up to, you know, in this case, that newt might walk miles away. But most of the things that use the water here are going to be living out their lives within, you know, 1,000 or 2,000 feet of the pool. So it's all one big interconnected matrix.
If I can add to
Yes,
that
please.
as well, I'll add that even though most of the critters that breed right in the pool are from the forest immediately around it, there's another even bigger picture thing to keep in mind too, and that's that to keep a population healthy, you need to have some genetic exchange with other populations to prevent inbreeding from happening within that one population. So not only do we really need to think about the role of that vernal pool and the surrounding forest, but we really need to think about how that population is going to connect with other populations. And
That's
so
such a great
just
point.
putting, if we were to surround a vernal pool and the habitat around it by roads or development, then it still may be threatened over the long run because there could be problems associated with that inbreeding that could occur.
So they're very vulnerable wetlands because they aren't recognized often. Either they just aren't known about, or they're found in a season when they're not full of water, or, you know, all kinds of things contribute to that. Who's keeping track of where they are right now? Like, who's helping protect vernal pools?
Do you want to take that, Sean?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of organizations. So there's the Vermont Reptile and Amphibian Naturalist is a great resource that's keeping tabs on what different species of amphibians in particular are being found throughout the state. And then the Vermont Center for Eco Studies actually runs a community science project all around vernal pool monitoring. And so they've actually mapped confirmed and probable vernal pools, thousands of them all across the state, and have a large team of volunteers, and any of us could join that team, who go out and monitor these year after year after year and see how the populations are changing, and how the water levels are changing and that sort of thing. So folks can get involved.
Are they legally protected? Like if you own a vernal pool, are you obligated to take care of it as a wetland?
Well, vernal pools are now classified automatically as Class 2 wetlands. And so they are actually under the same protections that any other Class 2 wetland would have.
Wow.
That usually only includes the pool itself and maybe a 50-foot buffer around it, however.
Although we know maybe 600 feet is what you really need.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's a start. It's a start.
But it's an interesting thing to think about too. Most of these vernal pools are very small. In terms of forest protections or wetland protections, we're usually looking at much larger acreage. It doesn't take much to harm a place so small. And so they're somewhat fragile simply because it's a very small amount of land area that we're talking about.
So, Monica, I want to pick up on a point that you made, which is that these, the offspring, let's say, of the animals using this pond, who live in this forest, need to be able to disperse and find other mates and ponds of their own. I mean,
yes.
And so we know one of the times they're extremely vulnerable is crossing roads.
Right.
So I know Sean, North Branch Nature Center has a program for helping these animals cross roads. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about?
Could I just make one point on that first as we're talking about them dispersing? Most of the animals that breed in this pool are actually going to come back and lay their own eggs in the same pool.
So even the young.
So even the young, most will be loyal to the same pool.
So they're not like beavers
that really disperse long distances. We might be talking about one animal bringing in genetic material every generation, say.
Wow.
But that's
critical.
that one animal every generation is really important in order to just put a mix of genes into the population that will help it stay healthy for the long run.
And that's a great segue into the importance of their conservation at amphibian road crossings. So we're here in May, right? But in April, these animals, the amphibians, they moved from upland forests into places like this, and in many places they cross a road in the process of that.
Because it's been fragmented over time.
It's the fragmentation, exactly, and the car tires can be a huge source of mortality.
It's hard to survive
for these.
that.
Yeah,
yes, if you're
it's true.
Little.
And because of what Monica you just said about how most of these organisms are coming back to the same place they were born, if there's high mortality at a road crossing, even something like 10% of the amphibians getting killed by car tires annually, that's enough to wipe out the entire population at that vernal pool. And you add to that the point that there is that rare individual that needs to get up and go and might cross 5 or 6 or 7 roads on the way to some other vernal pool. So these road crossings are a really important thing for us to protect and keep track of, so that we can maintain populations at the nearby vernal pools, but also protect the dispersers as well that are going farther distances.
So Sean, there are a couple of things, maybe 3 things at least, that I can think of that people can do, the humans can do to help amphibians this time of year. And one of them is to physically get out and help them cross the road. But also, if you're in a car on a rainy night, when it's like been 50 that day and it drops down and it's cold at night, but it's raining, don't go out in your car.
And you're talking especially in those first rainy nights of spring.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. So I try not to drive those roads that I know are near wetlands, that time of year at night, so you can reduce traffic. You can help them cross. And then Monica, you were mentioning their citizens have gotten really creative in some towns like Moncton and done even more.
Yeah, in the town of Moncton there was a very critical crossing where there was high mortality between the amphibians in their forest habitat where they spend most of the year and the vernal pool where they breed in the spring. And there was such high mortality that a group of citizens got together and actually built them a crossing. And it's a crossing that goes under the road. It's basically an expanded culvert. But it's in a very critical place. There's some infrastructure in place that kind of guides the
And
amphibians
I've seen
under
some
the
footage.
road.
And
Yeah.
at night it's hopping.
Yeah,
Like on those
exactly.
big nights. So big nights. There are big nights.
Big nights. And one of the fun things about that footage that you've probably seen is that they're critical for amphibians, especially in those rainy nights in spring, but there are a lot of other animals that actually use it too. And so it can actually help larger mammals like,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, bobcats or, different animals as well that actually would prefer to cross under the road when given the opportunity.
So we're lucky that VTrans in Vermont is actually focused on this problem somewhat, and we're trying, as we improve and expand or redo roads, to take that opportunity to provide animal crossings that are safer. And they find them. I mean, the mammals find them. The amphibians may just end up in them, but it's all good. So.
And if I might plug the North Branch Nature Center's amphibian road crossing program, that's exactly what we're doing. Is we're now working all across the state to find these road crossings and work with municipalities and VTrans to alert folks saying, yeah, there's a crossing here. There's this kind of abundance of amphibians moving. Let's see what we can do about putting in a different kind of culvert or closing a road or whatnot.
Beautiful. Yeah, I know, like near me in Chittenden County on Pond Road that goes by Shelburne Pond, like just 2 weeks ago, I was walking that road and moving spring peepers across, and I'd get to the end of that section of the road that was near the wetland, turn around to come back, it was full of peepers again. I mean, they just, it's like, it's not the kind of work that you do and you're done. You stay out there as long as you can and just help all the critters that you can, but you can help hundreds of them in a single night, if you hit one of those big nights when a lot of things are moving. So it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on another Vermont Master Naturalist hike, and we had some good luck out here. We really didn't know what we'd find, did we? You play the odds when you go looking for amphibians and salamanders, but we had a good day. And Kerry, you told me that you were in a frog chorus recently. Can you lead us out in a frog chorus?
I sure can. So, let's all choose a frog that we know the sound of, and then we'll all sing it together. We'll all sing our different sounds together. So I'll be a spring peeper, and they make the sound peep, peep, peep.
All right.
What are you gonna
All
be?
right, I'm going to attempt a toad trill,
Okay.
and they can keep that on for a while. We'll see how long I can go.
Quack like a wood duck.
Uh-huh.
Raggle, raggle, raggle.
I like it. I'm gonna try to be a bullfrog. We didn't see one today, but they have this sort of, I think of it as like braying. They kind of go. All right, are we ready?
Beautiful, yeah.
All together now?
Okay, ready? Peep, 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 peep.
Raggle, 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 raggle,